Marcus Webb scored 196 points in Family Feud Fast Money, 4 points short of winning $20,000. And when the board flipped and Steve Harvey read the final number, Marcus didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, eyes forward, breathing the way a man breathes when he has been practicing not falling apart in public for 31 years. Steve saw it. Steve put his cards down on the podium and said, quietly into the microphone that the whole studio could hear Marcus. "Tell me what's going on." What Marcus said next, 4 sentences, spoken in a voice so even and so controlled that it made the quiet in that studio feel like the inside of a church, would be seen by 341 million people and trigger a national conversation that is still unfolding today. It was a Friday afternoon in mid-September when the Family Feud studio in Atlanta opened its doors for the day's taping. Steve came out the way he always did. Long strides, wide smile, working the audience before the cameras were even fully warm, pointing at people in the crowd, asking about jobs and hometowns and whether anyone had driven more than 6 hours to be here. Someone from Baton Rouge had. Steve made a joke about Baton Rouge that the woman from Baton Rouge loved. The studio settled into its rhythm. The Webb family came out first. Marcus, his wife Diane, their 7-year-old son Jordan, Marcus's brother Terrell, and Diane's college roommate, a woman named Sasha who had flown in from Portland and was wearing a shirt that said Webb Family Takeover in iron-on letters. Jordan, 7 years old and wearing a clip-on tie, walked onto the stage and immediately looked up at the lights and said, loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "It's like the sun is inside." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Steve crouched down, looked at Jordan, and said, "Young man, you are correct. And you look sharp." Jordan straightened his clip-on tie. Marcus smiled when that happened. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes, but just for a second. Diane caught it, and caught the moment it faded too. She reached over and put her hand on his arm, just briefly, before the game began. Terrell, on Marcus's left, leaned in and said something that made Marcus nod once. Nobody in that studio knew yet what Marcus Webb had been carrying onto that stage for the last 8 months. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Marcus Webb was 7 years old when he had his first clear memory of a restaurant. Not because the food was good, because of what happened when his family sat down. It was a Sunday after church, 1994, a diner in Macon, Georgia. His father had been a deacon at Greater Zion Baptist for 11 years, and Sunday dinners after service were sacred. The whole family, grandparents included. 10 or 12 people filling a booth and 2 pulled-up chairs, ordering sweet tea by the pitcher. That Sunday, a woman 2 tables over called the manager over and said, loud enough for Marcus and his little brother to hear, that she didn't want to sit near that kind. The manager didn't ask her to lower her voice. He moved her table instead. Marcus's father didn't say anything. He unfolded his napkin, placed it in his lap, and ordered his food. Marcus watched his father's hands while he ate. Steady, deliberate, as if the only way to answer what had just happened was to exist with dignity in the same room where someone had tried to make them feel like they didn't belong. Marcus carried that image for 31 years. He grew up, married Diane, had Jordan, built a career as a logistics coordinator for a freight company in Charlotte, North Carolina, a job he had held for 9 years without a single disciplinary note in his file. He was the kind of man who showed up 12 minutes early to everything. He coached Jordan's t-ball team on Saturday mornings. He called his mother every Sunday. He had never raised his voice in a professional setting. He had learned the way that black men in America learn, very early and very specifically, the rules of existing in spaces that were not designed with them in mind. He knew which restaurants to call ahead. He knew to ask for a table by the window. He knew to tip before the bill came. He knew all of it, and he did all of it, because the alternative was to carry the risk of what happened when you didn't. The night that started everything happened on a Tuesday in January, 8 months before the Family Feud taping. Marcus and Diane took Jordan to a restaurant they had been to twice before, a mid-range Italian place called Marchetti's in their neighborhood in Charlotte. They liked it because the pasta was good and the lighting was warm, and it was the kind of place where Jordan could order his own food and feel like a grown-up. They sat at a booth near the back. Jordan ordered spaghetti. He was wearing a shirt with a dinosaur on it, and he was telling his parents in great detail about a book he'd read at school about a stegosaurus. And Marcus was watching his son talk with his hands and thinking that this exact thing, this dinner, this ordinary Tuesday, was everything he worked for. The woman sat 3 booths away. She had come in with a group of 4, 2 other women and a man, and they had been laughing loudly since they arrived. Her name, Marcus would later learn from the restaurant's social media response, was Sandra Pruitt. She was in her early 50s, and she had lived in the neighborhood for 22 years. Marcus did not notice her at first. He was watching Jordan. He heard Diane's face change before he processed what had been said. He saw Diane's expression shift, saw something go tight behind her eyes, and then he replayed the last 3 seconds and understood. Sandra Pruitt had said, to her table and to the general air around it, nodding in the direction of the Webb family's booth, "Can't even take the kids out anymore without the whole place changing." Her table laughed. Jordan had not heard it. He was still talking about the stegosaurus. Marcus looked at his son's face, the absolute unclouded joy on his 7-year-old face, while he described the plates on the stegosaurus's back, and something in Marcus's chest pulled tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with grief. Because Jordan didn't know yet. He didn't know about restaurants and windows and calling ahead. He didn't know to scan a room. He didn't know what it meant when a table laughed. Marcus knew exactly what he was going to have to teach him, and he did not want to teach him tonight. Their waiter, a 26-year-old named Cole Denton, who had been working at Marchetti's for 3 years, had heard everything. He had been walking from the kitchen with a bread basket when Sandra Pruitt said what she said. He stopped. He set the bread basket down on the nearest service stand. He stood still for a moment. Then he walked directly to the manager's office. He told the manager, a man named Greg Follows, what had just happened. Greg Follows walked out, looked in the direction of both tables, and said, "Cole, let's not make this into something." He went back into his office. Cole Denton picked up the bread basket. He brought it to the Webb family's table. He set it down. He crouched so he was at Jordan's eye level and said, "Hey, buddy, what did you order?" Jordan said spaghetti. Cole said, "Best thing on the menu." "Good choice." He stood up. He looked at Marcus and Diane. He said, quietly, "I heard what was said. I'm sorry the manager didn't act. I want you to enjoy your dinner." He paused. "Can I get you anything else right now?" Marcus looked at him for a moment. "No," he said. "Thank you." Cole went back to the service stand. He took out his personal phone. He opened the restaurant's public Yelp page. He left a review under his own name with his employee ID in the text, describing what he had witnessed, what Sandra Pruitt had said, what the manager had declined to do, and what the Webb family had been subjected to. Then he went back to work. The review was live by the time Marcus and Diane got Jordan to bed that night. Marcus saw it at 11:15, sitting at the kitchen table after Diane had gone to sleep. He read it twice. He sat with it for a long time. Cole Denton had written, at the end of the review, the family who came in tonight deserved a dining room where nobody had to scan the room. They got the opposite. That's not okay. And I work here, and I'm saying it out loud. Marcus closed his phone. He put his head in his hands. He sat there for a while in the quiet of his kitchen and did not cry, but came very close. He did not tell Jordan what had happened that night at the restaurant. Jordan asked the next morning why they hadn't gone back to the dinosaur book conversation, and Marcus said they could talk about it at dinner. Then Jordan said okay, and ate his cereal. Diane watched Marcus from across the table. That morning, before Marcus left for work, Jordan tugged on his sleeve and said, looking up at him with complete seriousness, "Daddy, are those people going to be at the restaurant again?" Marcus looked down at his son, 7 years old. He had heard something. He just hadn't understood what it was yet. "No, buddy," Marcus said. "They won't be." Jordan nodded and went back to his cereal. Marcus stood in his own kitchen for a moment, in the January light, and felt the weight of what was coming. The years of conversations ahead. The teaching he was going to have to do. The things he was going to have to put words to for this boy who still believed that the Stegosaurus was the most interesting thing in the world. And he pressed his hand flat on the kitchen counter and breathed. Cole Denton's review was shared 84,000 times in the first 48 hours. Marchetti's management issued a statement that called the incident a misunderstanding. Cole Denton was terminated the following week. The stated reason was violation of social media policy. Within 3 days of the termination announcement, 22,000 people had left one-star reviews on Marchetti's page. 6 local news outlets ran the story. Cole gave 3 interviews, in each of which he said the same thing: "I don't regret it." They deserved better than what they got in that dining room. Marcus filed a discrimination complaint with the Charlotte Human Rights Commission. The commission opened an investigation. Marchetti's hired a PR firm. 8 months after the dinner, Marcus Webb applied to Family Feud. He applied because Diane had seen a clip from a previous episode and said, "What if we went on? Jordan would love it." He applied because Jordan, when told they might be on a television game show, had put both fists in the air and said yes. He applied because he needed, very badly, to be somewhere his son could watch him win something. And he was not thinking, when he filled out the application form, about what had happened at Marchetti's in January. He was thinking about Jordan's face when he said yes. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. The game was 2 rounds in when Steve Harvey paused between questions, looked at Marcus Webb, and said, not for any production reason, not prompted by a producer, but because Steve Harvey has been in rooms with people for 30 years and he knows when someone is carrying something, "Hey, Marcus, you doing all right?" Marcus said, "Yes, sir," Steve said. "You sure?" A beat. The studio fell completely silent. Marcus Webb looked at Steve Harvey. He set his hand on the podium, flat, and then he said, "No, sir, I'm not sure. But I'm here." He paused. 8 months ago, a woman at a restaurant told the room she didn't want to be near my family. My son was there. He was 7. He almost heard it. And the waiter who stood up for us lost his job for it. He stopped. "I came here so my son could watch me stand at a podium on television and not look over my shoulder." 4 sentences. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for anything. He just stood there, at the Family Feud podium, in his button-down shirt and his good shoes, with his 7-year-old son watching from the family section, and told the truth in the quietest voice in the room. 300 people held their breath. The crew was motionless. Steve Harvey's hand moved slowly to his chest, His smile was completely gone. His head went down. He pressed his handkerchief to his face and turned slightly away from the cameras, not to hide it, but because the body does what it does. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Jordan in the family section, the 7-year-old in the clip-on tie who was watching his father with wide, serious eyes. Steve stepped back from the podium. "Cut the cameras," he said. "I need a minute." A stage manager stepped in from the wings. 2 producers appeared in the booth window. Steve Harvey held up one hand. "No," he said. "I'm not stopping the show. I'm stopping the game, just for a minute. Because this has never happened in the 45-year history of this program, and it's going to happen right now." He walked to the edge of the stage, where the family section was. He looked at Jordan. He crouched down to the boy's eye level, this man in his suit, in the middle of a live television taping, and he said, "Young man, what's your name?" Jordan said, "Jordan." Steve said, "Jordan, your daddy just said something that a lot of grown-ups are afraid to say. You understand that?" Jordan looked at his father, then back at Steve and said, in the way that a 7-year-old says something true and large, "Are you sad, mister, Steve?" The audience made a sound. Not applause. Something quieter than applause. Steve Harvey pressed his lips together. He nodded. Once, slowly, he said, "Yeah, buddy, I am." He stood up. He turned to the studio. "Let me tell you something," he said. Not to Marcus, not to the audience, but to the cameras, to the people watching at home. There is a young man who worked in a restaurant in Charlotte, North Carolina, who lost his job because he stood up for a family that deserved to eat dinner in peace. His name is Cole Denton. Cole Denton did the right thing and got fired for it. I want everyone watching this video to know his name. He paused. Because I was told my whole life that certain rooms weren't for me. I was told that by people who never had to think about it. And I made a promise a long time ago, when I was living in a car, when I was eating out of trash cans, when I had nothing. I made a promise that if God got me out of that car, I would spend the rest of my life making rooms bigger, not smaller. He looked at Marcus. Marcus Webb walked into a room in January that tried to make him smaller. Cole Denton tried to make it bigger and paid for it. Today, I'm making it bigger. He said, "Low and even, not in my house." Never. He wasn't finished. Steve pulled out his phone on the stage of Family Feud, in front of the full audience and every camera in the building, and called his wife Marjorie. He put it on speaker. He said, "Marjorie, I'm on set. I need you to get me Cole Denton's contact information, the waiter from Charlotte, North Carolina, the Marchetti story. I want him to have his legal fees covered through the Harvey Foundation, and I want him on the phone today." He listened. He said yes, today. He ended the call. He turned back to the stage. He told Marcus that both families were walking out with the full prize, the $20,000 that Marcus's 196 points had come 4 short of reaching. Both families. Full amount. The competing team, a family from Decatur named the Holloways, crossed to Marcus's side of the stage before Steve had finished the sentence. The oldest Holloway, a woman named Ruth who was 71 and had driven 6 hours to be at the taping, put both of her arms around Diane Webb and held on. She didn't say anything. She just held on. The audience was on its feet. The crew was not. Hardened television professionals were looking at the floor. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the family section one more time. He looked at Jordan Webb, who was watching everything with the same wide, serious eyes. Steve said, "Jordan, your daddy came here so you could watch him not look over his shoulder. Did you see him?" Jordan nodded. Steve said, "Remember that." When the episode aired 7 weeks later, it had 78 million views in the first 24 hours. Within 6 days, it crossed 341 million. The hashtag #ColeDeservesBetter trended in 23 countries for 11 consecutive days. Within 2 weeks of the episode airing, a coalition of 14,000 restaurant industry workers in the United States published an open letter to the National Restaurant Association calling for explicit anti-discrimination protections for staff who report or intervene in discriminatory incidents by customers. They cited Marcus Webb and Cole Denton by name. 3 months after the taping, the Charlotte Human Rights Commission issued its findings in Marcus Webb's discrimination complaint. Marchetti's, facing both the Commission's findings and the sustained public pressure, entered a settlement that included mandatory staff bias training, the posting of a visible non-discrimination policy in the dining room, and a direct payment to Marcus Webb's family. The amount was not disclosed. Cole Denton's legal fees were covered in full through the Steve Harvey Foundation within 10 days of the episode airing. A wrongful termination suit against Marchetti's parent company was filed the following month. The case settled 14 months later. Cole Denton's attorney issued a one-line statement. Cole is grateful, and he would do it again. A year after the taping, the Table Foundation was established, named for the sentence Marcus Webb had said on the Family Feud stage. The sentence about wanting his son to watch him stand somewhere without looking over his shoulder. The foundation's motto, taken from Cole Denton's own words in his original Yelp review, is printed on every outreach document. They deserved a dining room where nobody had to scan the room. In its first year, the Table Foundation partnered with 34 restaurants in 11 cities to implement explicit customer dignity protocols and bystander training for all front-of-house staff. It has trained over 3,800 restaurant workers across the country and has a waiting list of 61 restaurants requesting program inclusion. Steve spoke about Marcus in a long-form interview the following spring. He said, "What people don't understand about what happened in that studio is that Marcus Webb wasn't angry. He was tired. There's a difference. Angry is something you can argue with. Tired is something you recognize. And I recognized it because I know what it is to be in rooms where someone has already decided you're not worth the space. That's why I made the call. That's why I said Cole's name on camera. Because rooms only get bigger when somebody's willing to say the name out loud." 2 years after the taping, Marcus received a message from Cole Denton. It was a photograph. Cole had just been hired as the assistant general manager of a new restaurant opening in Charlotte. The restaurant had a non-discrimination policy printed on the front of its menu. Cole's message had 3 words. "Thought you'd like." Marcus showed the photo to Jordan at breakfast. Jordan, now 9 years old, looked at it and said, "That's the waiter." Marcus said yes. Jordan said, "Is he okay now?" Marcus said he was. Jordan nodded, the way 9-year-olds nod when they have filed something important, and went back to his cereal. That morning, before Jordan left for school, he stopped at the door and turned around and said, "Dad, can we go back to Marchetti's sometime?" Marcus looked at his son. "No," he said, "but we can go somewhere better." Jordan thought about this. "Okay," he said. "Can they have spaghetti?" Marcus said they could find somewhere with spaghetti. Jordan picked up his backpack and left for school. In a restaurant in Charlotte, on a Tuesday night in January, a 7-year-old boy in a dinosaur shirt had been telling his parents about a stegosaurus when the room tried to make his family smaller. He hadn't fully understood it then. By the time he was 9, sitting at his own kitchen table with a cereal bowl and a photograph of a waiter who had stood up, he understood something larger instead. that the rooms you build are more important than the rooms that close against you, and that the people who make them bigger are worth knowing by name. If this story about Marcus and Cole and what happens when one person chooses dignity over silence moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one act of courage in an ordinary room can change more than you know. Have you ever watched someone stand up for a stranger, or been the stranger someone stood up for? Let us know in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what it means to make a room a little more human.